Hi there you guys, and welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a while since I've done a movie review, and I also have not done the weekly show that I just started, which is already pretty abysmal, but unfortunately stuff has gotten in the way. However, I do have a couple of challenge videos in the works with some friends of mine who are also starting up their own YouTube channels, of which I am going to give you more information at the end of my video. But first, let's get to a movie review that I teased in my last Dose episode, where I said I would be talking about Black Mass. So Black Mass is the story of Whitey Bulger, who is basically one of the most notorious gangsters in American history. He was the leader of the Irish mob from Boston for a good chunk of the late 60s, most of the 70s, and into the 80s, and then went on the run in the 90s. When I initially saw the trailers, I was very excited for it. It was really something I was anticipating and looking forward to. And the actors that are in that movie really got my interest because a lot of them are actors that I think are very good at character acting. The movie in and of itself is a biography, basically. It's a loose biography, but it's based on historical events and it's based on real events. So to an extent, you have to accurately portray how people would have responded in the situation at the time and to the circumstances of which they were exposed to. And there's a variety of characters that come in and out of the movie, and each of them, I think, are played very well by their actors, even by actors that I didn't even think would stand out all that much or have a very big role in the movie. I forget the actress's name, but the woman who played Anastasia Steele in the 50 Shades of Grey movie, she plays Whitey Bulger's girlfriend or wife. I'm not exactly sure if they were married or not. But she plays his significant other in the movie, and despite the fact she's only in the movie for like 5, maybe 10 minutes, she makes an impact on you, and she does a good enough job where you feel like that because that character comes in and goes out very quickly in the movie, it leaves enough of an impact for you to realize that this was an important person in this particular character's life, and the events that surrounded this character really influenced his actions from then on and how he developed as a person. It's things like that, those little things in this movie that, you know, even though there are characters that may not necessarily feel like they have a major role in the movie, they impact the main characters in a way that you don't necessarily see, and they have a larger ripple effect throughout the rest of the movie. The story is very well told. It starts from when Whitey was still doing sort of small-time stuff in Boston and mainly just kind of kept to the south side of Boston. And then at the time, the north side of Boston was kind of being taken over by the Italian mob. And I'm actually really sorry if I keep forgetting names of other characters in this movie, just because Whitey Bulger is the only name that I really remember at this time, because I've seen a bunch of other movies since I've seen Black Mass, and for some reason the names are really escaping me. But I'll probably be able to more easily identify them by their actors' names. So if you do end up seeing Black Mass, which I do recommend, you can sort of identify who I'm talking about based on the actor that I'm referring to. So Joel Edgerton plays a childhood friend of Whitey Bulger, who Whitey Bulger is himself played by Johnny Depp, who does an amazing job at transforming himself into this greasy, slimy, mob kind of guy. And it's, I don't know, like, I haven't seen Johnny Depp do a performance like this in a very long time, and it's really nice to see him sort of get back into this kind of acting, because I'm so tired, honestly, of seeing him do, you know, these projects with Tim Burton where he's basically playing the same character over and over and over again. He's either really quirky and weird, or he's very dour and gothic and very like, the world hates me kind of thing. Like, I'm tired of those. Give me character, give me something different, give me some acting that really takes a lot of chops to pull off, and pull off well and be convincing. He does that in this movie as Whitey Bulger. Getting back to the story, so Whitey creates an alliance with Joel Edgerton's character, who works with the FBI and becomes technically an informant for the FBI. As a result, he feeds them bits and pieces of information, although not that much, because Whitey's big thing is that he hates snitches, he hates rats. So he himself didn't even like the idea too much of joining the FBI and becoming an informant for them. And he always said he would never rat out his own friends. He would never rat out, you know, the people he specifically works with or who are his business partners. So the only time that he ever gave them information was when it was basically in benefit to Whitey. So basically the only time he gave them information was when it benefited him. As a result, the Italian mob family was taken down by the FBI when Whitey revealed to them where their headquarter location was, because the FBI had never been able to find out where their base of operations was. So when they found that, they wiretapped it, they got information on all the things that they were doing, they arrested them. Whitey then continues to spread his reign throughout all of Boston, and he murders people. He's got racketeering, he's got gambling, he's got extortion, he's got a whole bunch of things that he's got lined up throughout the city, and then he even starts making his way through other states. That's where he sort of starts getting into trouble, because as a result of being an informant, they always said that he wasn't allowed to murder anybody, but of course he basically played the FBI to such an extent that he was getting away with so many murders because they didn't want to ruin the opportunity that they had with Whitey to get information on other people. But then at a certain point it became the fact that they weren't getting any more information out of him. As a result, they were like, well, what's the point of protecting him and letting him run amok all over Boston and control the city the way that he's doing if they're not getting any substantive information out of him? So eventually the FBI turns on him and turns on the character that Joel Edgerton plays. So they arrest Joel Edgerton's character. He serves lifetime sentences, various sentences, I think, for assisting in a murder. And there's various other people that Whitey worked with who basically, after Whitey became a fugitive, they went to the cops and they're basically like, okay, you got us. I'm going to give you all the information about Whitey Bulger that you could possibly want and ask for, about what kind of things he was doing, why he did them, and the circumstances of which led up to the events of him becoming a fugitive. There's also the part about his family life that it really plays a very big part in this movie, which I really love and appreciate, because for the most part, a lot of times when you show somebody who's this cold and who is this sort of has this lack of empathy, who's this psychotic to the level that Whitey Bulger was, and especially when you read about the things that he did and you see the movie and you see all the horrible things he was doing to people, you really wonder, like, how could this person have gone for so many years around family members and no one really said anything, or no one really like how did they react to that? And his family knew that he had been to Alcatraz before, because the movie takes place after he had already done a 7-year stint in Alcatraz. So there was already a period of time where they're like, we know he's a criminal, we know he does these really seedy and unsavory things, but it's like the family just kind of pushes it to the side and they just don't acknowledge it. I think that's what happens a lot of times when you have families that are involved with the criminal world, and especially in mobs and mafia business. A lot of times they just kind of fool themselves into thinking that, you know, well, what they do is their business. They consider that like, well, that's their job. That's not for me to get involved with. That's my business. So if they get in trouble for it, that's on them, but I had nothing to do with it. And that's very much played out in this movie, because Whitey Bulger had a good relationship with his wife and his kid, and he had a good relationship with his own brother and his mother up until his mother died. Which they state was another big impact as to when there was a big change in his takeover of Boston. That he really sort of dove so deep into it after that it got way out of hand and way out of control, almost to the point where he couldn't even control it anymore. But especially because his brother is played by Benedict Cumberbatch, and by the way, Benedict Cumberbatch does an amazing Boston accent, despite the fact he's very British, like he's got that very British accent. He does an amazing, like, Irish Boston accent. It's really well done. And, like, I buy him and Johnny Depp as brothers from Boston. They're very convincing in their roles, especially he's playing a politician. He played the, I believe it was the senator for Massachusetts, and as a result of what happened with Whitey Bulger, he ended up retiring as a politician, went to work for a university, and the university ended up forcing him to resign because they found out that he had been in touch with his brother while he was a fugitive. That's the only thing they could ever really pin on his brother, because otherwise his brother really did try and stay out of his business. He didn't really get involved with a lot of stuff. He didn't really try and shuffle things under the rug, and if Whitey got caught, he or if the FBI was on Whitey's tail, he really was just adamant about being like, that is not my business. Like, you don't have a right to come in here and say that I should have to protect my brother because that's my decision. Like, you can't force me to do that. So, and I think he really tried to be a good politician. He tried to be good to the people who elected him and be good to the people of his state. It's the fact that he had a brother who clearly had some psychotic issues and was very manipulative in a lot of different ways. And I think he loved his brother very deeply. He cared about him, but he also realized that to the extent his business is his business. That's none of my business. The same way that he wouldn't get Whitey involved with his political business. It's none of his either. And the aspect of his wife and his family, or I'm not even sure if it was his wife. All I'm gonna say is that his significant other, the real time that she spends in the movie sort of focuses on how Whitey is around his family and shows that he was compassionate towards his family and he did care about them very much so, and to the extent especially about his son. When his son got sick and basically she was trying to take care of him, and the doctors had told her a wrong piece of information because it was the 70s, a lot of medical information was out of date. And the only reason I really know this is because the friend that I went to the movies with is studying to be a nurse. So when the whole situation happened in the movie, I asked him, what the hell was that about? Please explain it to me. So what happened was, apparently Whitey's kid came down with a fever. At the time, you just used aspirin to kind of, you know, get rid of the aches and pains and things like that as a pain reliever. But the doctor that she had called had told her to keep giving him that medication every 4 hours. And 4 hours is what you would give to an adult. You wouldn't give that to a child. You would want to double that. So you want to make sure that they're only taking that medication once every 8 hours. So in reality, she's giving medication to a kid every 4 hours, and the medication basically causes them to have thinner blood. The brain doesn't get enough oxygen. They basically start to become brain dead as a result of it. And so that's what happened to Whitey Bulger's kid. As a result, his relationship with her really broke up, but you could tell that after that moment, he became so much colder and he became much less compassionate about the world because he felt that in some way the world had no compassion for him. There's a very strong moment of that because they have a big argument about when their son is on life support and he's not responsive and there's no way that he's going to come out of this. She basically tells him that she would pull the plug because she doesn't want to see her son suffer like that. Whereas Whitey is so disgusted with her and he hates her so much for even thinking about killing him that they completely clash, and they cannot see how the other person can be so heartless and so cold. Like, he looks at her and thinks that she's so unloving and so lacking of empathy that she would just pull the plug on her own son. But then she looks at him and says, you can't say that about me when I'm doing this because I care about our son and I don't want to see him suffer like this. And in reality, look at the kind of things you do. Look at the things you've done to people, how you've ruined people's lives. And it's one of those things where you realize that you can't, as much as you may love somebody and you try not to get involved in their business, especially if they're doing something that's really sort of backhanded and really against your moral center and your moral core, those things eventually do come up and they will boil over. And that was the breaking point for him. I think that was the first initial breaking point. The movie really does go in this kind of long incline plane downwards. There's no moment. I feel like the best time of Whitey's life was at the beginning of the movie, and it just got worse and worse as time went on. Like, he started off having a relatively healthy relationship with his family. He would see his mother every day. He had a significant other and a child, had a good relationship with his brother. And yes, he was doing all these things on the side and being part of the gang and everything, but it wasn't at the time, it wasn't like they were trying to take over all of Boston. They just kind of wanted to do what they wanted to do, and the only reason that they joined alliances with the FBI was because their territory was being infringed on by the Italians. So as a result, you really do sort of realize that the whole movie, there is no like, you start off low, you get high, and you get low again. it really was just this slow incline down for Whitey Bulger. It really just kind of started on its high note and then just went straight down for the rest of the time until he basically got caught. The movie ends with him going on the run, I believe in 1995 or 1996, and he isn't caught until 2011, I believe. And the movie just kind of ends with a montage of what happened to everybody, obviously, as they do with a lot of biopics. And one thing that I found very interesting with the way that they do the montage of everybody's story at the very end is all these people that Whitey sort of devoted himself to and like worked very closely with and who knew him very intimately in terms of the mob world. They're the ones who gave up information on him the fastest. They're the ones who, as soon as they got arrested for whatever they were associated with, some of them it was murder, some of them it was racketeering, some of them it was assault, it was various charges that was laid on these people. But as soon as the cops had them, they were like, we will give you shorter term sentences if you tell us everything you know about Whitey Bulger. They all gave up the information, and they all just basically went like, this is how crazy this guy was, and these are the things he did, although they themselves were a part of it and they did heinous and awful things themselves. The fact that Joel Edgerton's character never really snitched on Whitey Bulger. He never gave him up, despite the fact that he was eventually arrested and sentenced for things that he did in basically defending and protecting Whitey Bulger in the time that he was an informant for the FBI. And it's really shocking to think that, like, despite the fact that he got such a long-term sentence and he was implicated in all these terrible crimes that Whitey Bulger did, that he still never gave up information on him, despite the fact that every single one of Whitey Bulger's accomplices and the people that he worked with and worked with closely for many, many years gave him up as soon as they were arrested, basically. They were like, well, if there's a way for me to get a shorter term sentence, then yeah, of course I'm going to give up information on Whitey Bulger. I don't understand the reasoning behind Joel Edgerton's character not giving up Whitey Bulger, and I think that's meant to be something that's left up in the air to say, like, does he have his own issues in terms of mentally giving up people? Because throughout the whole movie, he talks about how when like you're that close because they come from the same neighborhood and they grew up together and they had such a close connection when they were kids that you feel like you can't turn your back on each other, because if you turn your back on each other, then you have nobody in the world. Because if even the people that you consider your blood and your brothers, he really does. He considers the Bulger family like family, as if they are his blood. So he goes above and beyond protecting these people. But that's the thing. Even when you look at the family dynamic within the Bulgers, they have no problem saying like, look, I love you and I care about you. But ultimately what you do is your business. And if you get in trouble for that, or if you get caught for doing that, then that's on you. I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to get in the middle of that because that's none of my business. And so it almost seems like Joel Edgerton's character is really lacking something in his own life to feel like he has to defend this awful criminal and defend this awful person. And what I really do like about it in the end is seeing that your protagonist, your main character in Whitey Bulger, really is not 100% a good guy. Like, he's not 100% a bad guy either, but he does some really awful, terrible things in this movie. What it really says to me is that you can have a movie where your protagonist and your antagonists are not clear. They're not clear cut. Because we have antagonists in this movie that I would theoretically say are probably the best good guys of the movie. They are the FBI agents, the ones that are trying to take down Whitey Bulger, and they're trying to take down even the Italian mob. And you know why? Because that's their job, and they realize that these guys are doing terrible things. They need to be stopped, because otherwise you're having lives ruined by having them in the city and for them doing what they're doing. So for them, it really does sort of paint the world in a little bit of a grayer tone to realize that even the most evil people in the world and the people who do the most heinous things are still well-rounded characters, and they still have families, they still care, they still have empathy, and they're still compassionate about certain things in certain situations. They're not 100% bad people, but they do very bad things. And the reason that Whitey Bulger is our protagonist is because it's his story we're technically following throughout the movie. It's him we're following as a character. So that makes him our protagonist by definition. but that doesn't necessarily mean he's the good guy of the movie. That doesn't mean he's doing great things and that we should be rooting for him. We root for him in the sense that we want him to almost be redeemed and we want him to become a good character, but really he doesn't. He runs away in the end, he becomes a fugitive, and in the end he's caught by the police. He's very unapologetic for the things that he's done, and that to me says that he really is a terrible character and he's a really terrible person overall. That being said, I like the fact that there are complexities to characters. I love it when characters are complex and you don't know 100% where certain people lie on a certain scale, because then it makes a movie unpredictable. It makes it seem more realistic, because depending on what people's motivations are and what people's incentives are in any given situation, some people can do terrible things and some people will do terrible things if it's for the right incentives. And that just says so much more about who we are as human beings and what it is that we consider morally right and morally wrong, and in what certain situations we're willing to bend those rules. I think that's incredibly interesting. And I think this movie accurately portrays the way that you interpret those situations and the way that other people will bend their own moral compass in order to accommodate those situations. Overall, I really enjoyed Black Mass. I think it's probably one of the best movies of the year. I think it's currently standing at a 75% on Rotten Tomatoes. That was the last time I checked it. But I would probably rate it somewhere in the 80s, probably 80 to 85. I think it's a fairly good movie. There's very few moments in the movie where I was like, oh really? Or like it took me out of the movie. There are certain situations when that happens. But for the most part, I found it very engaging, very entertaining, very well performed, very well acted. Cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. The way they show Boston, especially because I don't know very much about Boston as a city, and I found that even though, again, a lot of the parts of this movie are dramatized and parts of it are probably fictionalized, you feel like you get an overall sense of what the place was like during the 70s and 80s when this guy had basically taken over the city and run amok throughout it. You feel like you get a good atmosphere for the place and what it was like during that time. So thank you guys so much for watching this review. I know I haven't been keeping up with these as much as I would like, but what I will be doing in the near future is I actually have a couple of collaboration videos coming up. So what's going to be happening is I have a friend who is starting up her own YouTube channel. Her name is Mila Nicola. So what I'll do is I'll put an annotation somewhere in the video, or I will put a link in the description below, and you guys can click it, watch her videos, see if you like them. She tends to do a lot of vlog stuff, a lot of comedy stuff. She does a lot of skits and stuff, and she does some challenge videos with a few friends. We're actually going to be doing a couple of videos in the near future. I've convinced her to do a review with me, which will be coming out hopefully in the next few weeks. What we'll also be doing is maybe a challenge video for her channel. There's a couple of other vlogs and stuff I'd like to do and really figure out my scheduling, because I need to find a way of getting videos up on a consistent basis. I want to keep up with the weekly videos for Dose, and then maybe once every 2 weeks do a movie review, and then beyond that post a vlog if it's interesting and if I'm doing something, or if I travel somewhere and I think it's interesting enough to put up on the channel, I will. But for the most part, I want to keep it to weekly and bi-weekly, and hopefully I can get something structured that is consistent enough with my own work schedule. So that's about it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please hit like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you did or didn't like about the video so I can improve it for future videos. I really appreciate you guys watching. Also, please let me know what you guys thought of Black Mass. Am I really off the deep end and thinking it's one of the best movies of the year, or do you guys agree with me? Do you think it is one of the best movies of the year? Overall, I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys do too. Otherwise, that's about it. Thank you guys so much for watching. See ya.